Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, I love the whole idea that you told me about this little space, which is across the river from where I live, and that we had a day with no rain and we could come over here. So, yeah, kind
It
of
really
perfect.
aligned perfectly. Yeah.
Yes. Hmm.
It's a blessing. So I'm here in Yarmouth, Maine with my personal superhero. This is Dr. Christiane Northrup. She has been an absolute godsend, a martyr for female health, for human health. She's helped me realize so many things, and she's so generous with her wisdom, as you can tell by her willingness to speak with me today. One huge reason why I'd want to speak with you is just noticing you've advocated for really really basic health principles. Honestly, you've advocated for women to just kind of recognize their own systems and take charge of their health, and you've been doing this for a while.
A long while.
And it hasn't been easy. You're like the original. I mean, I just can't imagine the amount of backlash you've faced, and then today hopefully you're looking around like, all right, you're starting to catch on, guys.
You know, the truth of the matter is I didn't think my work would be accepted in my lifetime, but it was very accepted, with 3 New York Times bestsellers, 10 times on Oprah,
Yeah.
8 public television specials, made millions for PBS.
Amazing.
And then the COVID thing hit, and
Right.
I know you're going to put this on YouTube, so I know what we don't say,
Right.
so that we won't be censored. But when COVID hit, it was a whole new level of um, censorship, really, but it was more than censorship. So I want people to understand that it was, here we are by the cross, it was the spirit of fear
Oh,
that
absolutely.
took people over.
Oh my God.
And
1 second, I want to make sure the
yeah,
audio is good here because I'm a little,
yeah,
it's not quite the standard setup, but I want to make sure
Yeah.
I'm picking up
yeah.
it's the energy of fear that
So it was
became.
literally the spirit of fear.
Okay.
And I want you to think about it as a being. And I
Mhm.
didn't know really any of this. I knew my whole career about John D. Rockefeller and the Flexner Report from 1910. And those of us in holistic medicine had always known about this, because what happened in 1910 is that Rockefeller hired Abram Flexner to
Okay.
go out and, quote, standardize medicine. What that meant, though, was getting rid of all the black medical schools, all of the women's medical schools, and all the herbalist schools, all of the homeopathic schools, all the osteopathic schools, anything that dealt in natural treatments. Because what Rockefeller wanted was pharmaceutical-based treatments based on petroleum products. Now, here's the other thing that people need to know. You cannot patent a naturally occurring substance. So, for instance, about literally in 2010, so we're talking about 14 years ago, I was on Oprah with Suzanne Summers, and we were talking about bioidentical hormones. What does that mean? It means a hormone that exactly matches what the female body or the male body makes. Now, birth control pills could be made from those. They would be much safer, but you can't patent them, so you can't make money. So all of the hormone replacement has been different from what the female body itself makes. And when you do that, you get so-called side effects. These are not side effects. They are effects. So there's been a kind of a war between the natural products world and big pharma.
Oh, that's a huge distinction, though. I had no idea that, I mean, the molecular difference.
Yeah.
Coming up as more like a consequence or an effect, like you say.
Absolutely. So for years, I've tried to talk to my OBGYN colleagues about the difference between bioidentical progesterone and medroxyprogesterone acetate, which is Provera, and it's got all these methyl groups. And if you just put the two chicken wire biochemical things together, they're different.
Yeah.
And that's lost on people.
Right.
And so anyhow, if you're talking about natural stuff and you're talking about natural immunity and ways to keep people healthy, then when COVID hit, what I was doing was, okay, we knew that those people with the highest levels of vitamin D and people who had zinc and people who weren't afraid and all the rest of it.
Who weren't afraid, though, is huge.
Well, that's the big one. So then I'm asked to go down. This was a turning point. Clay Clark asked me to go down to the very first Reawaken America tour in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay.
And I stayed in a place called Broken Arrow.
Nice.
And I'd never been to that part of the Midwest. I went to college in Cleveland, which I didn't realize was the Midwest till I moved to Maine and then was told, oh, yeah, well, no, that's the Midwest. You grew up in the Midwest. Oh, south of Buffalo, that's the Midwest. Now I realize, yes, it is.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I know, but it kind of is in terms of the way people think.
Right, right.
So my job at Clay's was to talk about what was in the thing, the COVID thing. And I did.
Yeah.
But I was also, this thing took place at Rhema Bible College. Okay. So I come from Maine where everyone's scared to death and they're all holed up wearing masks and staying 6 feet apart. And I'm suddenly in the auditorium of Rhema Bible College. People are singing praise songs. Their hands are raised. They're blowing the shofar. Nobody's afraid. Nobody was afraid. And it was at that time when we were seeing on the internet, there were all these groups of women who were having bleeding. And I was hearing, 90-year-olds, 2-year-olds. There was a group on Facebook of 100,000 women weighing in about their bleeding, that they would begun to bleed soon after they were around somebody.
Yeah. And if it's on Facebook, that's like a peer support group.
That's what it was. It's literally a peer support group. And they took it down. So I'm talking to Tiffany Parado, doing an Instagram live from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And we realize, wait a minute. This is their stories. These women need to be heard. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
So it was a time in the spring of 2021 where I'm watching my colleagues losing their licenses. I'm watching all this stuff happen. And like the Brownstone Institute, for instance, they were with Jay Bhattacharya. They're just saying, as epidemiologists, this is how we should be doing this.
Yeah.
And none of it was happening.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there next to this guy, happens to have 3 daughters. His name was Warren Geek. And I said, Warren, what are we going to do? We got to study this.
Right.
Warren had a company with the database to do a survey.
Okay.
So then we got together with Tiffany Parado, who was a marketing person and an analyst, and she had done the strategy for the disinformation dozen, hashtag more than 12, which, I was named in that group, and that went all over the world.
Yep.
That we were the 12 responsible for 70% of the disinformation.
Such a badge of honor at this point, as you've realized
at this point,
none of it's false.
Yeah, at this point, even though it wasn't true. I mean, they couldn't stand up to the 70% figure. But in any case, so Tiffany and a bunch of other researchers got this survey together of 6,000 women who had not had the shot, had no symptoms, no tests, everything was fine.
What an unexpected web, too. Nice job to see that need and coordinate.
It was a miracle. It was God. And so for 4 years, we've all worked to get our results out there in the scientific literature.
Yep.
And just this week, we did it.
Oh my gosh. Can we cheers?
Yeah.
We have raw milk here that we're enjoying because we are in Maine where that's
We're
okay.
in Maine. Yes.
Cheers. Congratulations.
Yeah, that was huge.
That is huge.
And it's making waves all over the world.
So long earned, like so overdue.
Well, so here's what we found. Within 3 days of being around a recently injected person, 70% of our women were having abnormal bleeding.
Oh my gosh.
Now, we'd published a prior study of what's called decidual cast shedding. That's
Okay.
where the entire inside of the uterus falls out.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And there were 40 cases in the world literature. In our group of 6,000 women, we had 240 cases.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. So
40
we were
in all history and then 240 as of the last 4 to 5 years.
in only 6,000 women. That was 40 in the whole world reported.
And you only had the women that were able to access you and like able to report.
That's right. So we knew this was a war on life. A war on life, because we knew that the stuff in the thing was being concentrated in the ovaries 64 times other organs. Now, the thing that I want to connect with here at the foot of the cross is that I'm there at Rhema Bible College, and they handed out a little booklet by Kenneth Hagin called The Believer's Authority.
Okay.
And in there is a quote from the book of Ephesians in the Bible, which is this: "We battle not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities of darkness that are not of this world." And then it goes on. It is not our reaction to that. It's not our job to fight them. It's our job to expose them.
Oh, okay.
And I realized,
I can do that.
Oh, this is what it is. This is what it is, because
that is so interesting.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And then
I began
and I'm thinking, this is biblical, this thing. So I began to go to East Point Christian Church in South Portland with Diane, who's been with me forever, and her husband died. And so I'd go with her, and I loved the praise music and I loved the whole thing, but I'd sit there, well, they're doing this.
Yeah.
And
I started going there when I first moved here, hoping to see you.
Yeah. Well, then what happened was I would watch the baptisms.
Yeah.
And it was just like being in labor and delivery.
Oh, interesting.
It felt the same. I would be overcome with tears, just like when a baby was born.
And you have that perspective.
Well, yeah. So I thought, this is real.
Yeah.
This is real. Being reborn is real.
Yeah.
So last year, September 17th, I was baptized. And I didn't do it until if I'd done it any earlier, it would just be, oh, well, everyone's turning Christian, so it's just virtue signaling. The Holy Spirit landed on me in a big way.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah. So I got what the whole thing was about. And then when you think about the censorship and all that, you go, really? Compared to Jesus?
Right.
Right. You got a problem?
No, exactly. I honestly, then I almost immediately feel guilty though, because I'm like, I'm not comparing myself to Jesus.
No, of course not. No, but you've got to do, we have to
recognize
the tension between picking up your cross and living a kingdom life.
Well, and if you're aligned with truth, like I think I forget where I heard this, but it feels similar to say that, instead of like having an offensive role, like you're not trying to take down this dark force, but you are trying to elucidate it. If it's real, if this is really happening, there's real talking points. There's a lot of discussion to be had. And if people aren't willing to do that, it's not going to happen. But that, I think, is like, it's a defense as opposed to an offense. You're speaking the truth. You're rooted in authenticity, and you're able to, from there, expose what isn't that.
Right. And I then met Pastor Dave Bryan of the Church of Glad Tidings with his wife, Cheryl. Well, Pastor Dave is a exorcist, a deliverance guy. And he told me this whole story, how they took down Anton LaVey in the Church of Satan. He is so grounded. He's so normal. You know who he's like? He's like that pastor from Bangor. Oh, that guy never closed his church. You
brought him up. I'm somehow blanking on his name.
Yeah, me too.
He came up with Bill Federer.
Yeah. Great lion of God, that guy. Keeps his Bible in a holster like a gun. Whereas Pastor Dave, has a belt buckle that is a gun. So, oh my goodness. And so Pastor Dave never closed his church. And the guy in Bangor never closed his church.
Yeah, and that's, The group in Dresden, if you're familiar with them, that I met the group at the barn in Dresden through MSU.
Yes.
And they used to put a sign out. I don't know if it's still up, but it would say "Community is our immunity."
Mhm.
And I know I hear that all the time throughout, various communities and different things, but the way that our first instinct, not even instinct, I think we were kind of encouraged to separate and isolate and pull back. The irony being that, we become so much better and so much healthier when we can,
Well, that.
hug and just
Yeah.
be
Well,
honest
if
and
you
genuine.
went through the Biderman steps of coercion,
Yep.
that's all the things that were done.
Yeah.
Now, solitary confinement is not allowed in prisons up to a certain point. It's illegal.
Oh, I didn't know
They
that.
put the human race
Yeah.
into solitary confinement.
No kidding.
There were people who hadn't been hugged or
Mhm.
in any group for 6 months. This is evil at a whole other level.
Yeah.
The number of people who died alone in care homes, and I'm seeing all of this going on. And you see, that's the spirit of fear.
Right.
That is not human. And it's not, I don't hold it against the people who fell under that spirit of fear, because what they need compassion, but they also don't need to be enabled.
Right. Well, I think it's a matter of momentum. Like, I
Yeah.
think each of us has this element of discretion. And for each of us, it's, tuned differently. So you talk about going to the Southwest and I'm like, yeah, we still look to New England for medical information always, right?
Yeah.
New England
Yeah.
Journal of Medicine.
Yeah.
We know there's really good work medically being done up here.
Mhm.
So to bring that intel across the country, I've met various people in various communities that's what's missing for them. They're like, we know something is up, but they can't actually take those steps to back it with scientific data and genuine, relevant intel. Because you're in the field, you know what you're talking about. So to be able to genuinely, promote a personal approach to health. I hope that's not putting words in your mouth.
No,
but
it's exactly. I'm an insider.
yeah.
So what I want people to know is your gut will tell you what to do.
Yeah, there we go.
Your gut. And it's interesting. So you were one of those people who had your antenna tuned to the frequency of truth. Now, what we had 2 groups. So we had all the people who'd followed me forever, and they would say things like, this happened, by the way, in Kansas City.
Okay.
I'm giving a lecture, and they wouldn't let us into the Kansas City Convention Center because some of us were not wearing masks when we went to the ladies' room. So they kicked us out of there. And so we had our meeting in a park across the street.
Okay.
So I'm speaking one evening.
Hang on one second.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Okay. Okay, so let's go with that again. Sorry, that's okay. So what happened was that this split. Okay, people went this way or this way. It's kind of like perimenopause for the planet.
Yeah.
Grow or die. So I'm there giving this lecture outside in Kansas City. A friend of mine is listening to a woman standing beside her on the other side of the park so she can see me giving the lecture. And she says to my friend, oh, her book saved my life.
I'm glad I'm not the only one with...
But she's lost her mind.
Oh, no.
There's a lot of that. I loved what she did, but she's lost her mind. Yeah. I just reviewed the hit piece written about me in the Washington Post, and I did not know this, but one of my longtime holistic medical friends, we were both on the board of trustees of the American Holistic Medical Association. They interviewed him, and he said, I don't know what happened to Chris. She's gone to the dark side. Now, he recently emailed me, and he's now got dementia, heart problems, and trouble walking.
Oh.
Because I remember when, at the beginning, I said, why are you advocating masks? And he said, why are you against it? They're saving lives. It's like, come on.
Yeah.
We had all that data early on. Every time you try to post it, fact checkers. By the way, I just found out that factcheck.com and all that, that's supported by Meta and Google.
Oh, of course it is.
That's who's behind. Listen, I mean, and the whole disinformation dozen, that's funded by the Center for the Countering of Digital Hate out of London, and that is funded by George Soros and his son. So,
It's
we
really
battle not against flesh and blood,
yeah.
but powers and principalities of darkness that are not of this world.
Yeah.
So what we have to do is come together as humanity, because then we are unstoppable. In order to remain free, we have to come together and work together. And that's where we are right now. And when people have things like Trump derangement syndrome, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
The brainwashing of the last 6 years,
Yeah.
that everything bad that's possibly happening is Trump's fault.
Yeah. Or
That
any
just-
politician. I mean,
or
it's
anyone.
such a, it's such
it
a,
makes no sense.
Yeah.
Now, let me be very clear. Do I think Trump is going to save us? No. I think we're going to save us.
there we go.
I think we're
All
going to save us. Now, would it be nice to have different policies? Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, my whole fall from grace just started with advocating LD 798 here in Maine.
Yeah.
We gathered 100,000 signatures to restore the religious exemption.
Oh, great.
That's all that was. We
Yeah.
had 100,000 signatures. Guess what? The Secretary of State put the vote in a Democratic primary in March of 2020. So why would you do that?
Yeah.
And I wasn't involved in running it, but why would the people running it ever consent to that? Well, they were tricked.
Yeah.
They were tricked.
Well, there's so much of that. I mean,
Yes, there's so much, of being tricked.
well, when you mentioned the antenna thing, like, I kind of want to talk about that because there was, I mean, it was like a weird kind of chain of events. I don't know exactly how I first encountered your work, but I knew, at least in my mind, you were like the go-to for women's health. And if I could learn anything from the internet, this is the direction I was going to go. So I started kind of catching wind of, basically advocating for being in touch with who you are and knowing who you are and protecting who you are. And I was like, this all works for me. I like this. There weren't a lot of people saying it, but I trusted my gut. And I was in Orlando at the time.
Yeah.
All our classes closed. You might find this interesting. They actually sent out material to every student telling you to kind of assess your friend group and be aware of where that circle was and be careful to not change it, like to not let to basically from a health and safety perspective, but it was essentially kind of discouraging new social interactions, or they're like, if you've got your friend group, know them and kind of be aware of where they're going, and don't change that too much because you don't know what might happen. And I was like, it felt weird to me, but with that sort of content coming through my university where I was studying, and they were closing, like I was in Bio 2 at the time, oddly, and we had one day of class. There were tanks on campus. Memory Mall, where we typically tailgate, tanks, Navy, every branch of local law enforcement and military was deployed. Like, there was Army, Navy, ROTC, cops, fire department, everybody. And I was like, I've never seen this. I've been going here for too long, like 7 years. And I go to class, and she goes, well, as always, we'll trust our officials, and if we're told to cancel classes, we will. I'm thinking, I've been here for a long time. Again, we canceled class once when there was a shooter on campus. So to do it for this reason, I'm thinking, this is very strange. But I knew my grandfather was up here, and I knew I wanted to come home. So I came to Yarmouth. My grandfather's giving me a tour around town. We're driving, and he points out, we're going past Main Street, and he goes, that was the last office I worked in. And I read your name on the side. I about lost my mind. I'm going, Christiane Northrup is in Yarmouth, Maine, and I thought it through. I could be wrong about this, but I was like you've said, you've done a million things. You've been all over the place, bestseller, interviews, Oprah. I feel as though you could have landed anywhere. I think you chose this town with great intention, and it's made me love Yarmouth 10 times as much because I trust your wisdom, I trust your instinct. And there's something different in the water here. There really is.
Yeah, it's a great town. It's a great town. Yeah.
Maine in general, and I don't want to talk too much about it, but just to offer a different perspective, because I think that's what's unique about how I've handled the last few years. I was in a metropolis, Orlando, then I come up here and I'm noticing exactly what you said. people actually work together. They really do.
Yeah, they do.
I think in Maine, it's only pretty and beautiful half the year, so it's gonna get tough. You gotta work hard. It's unavoidable. And the people who can still smile and do that are, there's just so much authenticity and integrity. And I don't think Mainers care for anyone else to know, which is why most people probably don't. It's like the best kept secret. But I do just want to acknowledge the grassroots effort that's happened here between you coordinating and starting MSU. I don't know how you want to speak about that.
Yeah, what happened was I was noticing that things were a little nuts.
Yeah.
And I was on a weekly Zoom on a Tuesday.
Okay.
And I met Pam Popper, Make Americans Free Again, Renette Senum, who'd been the mayor of Nevada City, California.
Okay.
So I was meeting all these people who had been involved in health choice for a long time.
Right.
And suddenly we're noticing all this stuff going down. For instance, just think back, everybody. Where do the circles come from overnight in the grocery store and the arrows? And what is it about a virus that if you're going this way, you're safe, but if you're going that way, you're not safe? And those circles overnight, and then the 5G towers go up overnight, and then I'm thinking about the testing. If this thing is that bad, why do you need to stick a swab up to the cribiform plate? So we were questioning all of that, and we were getting very different answers.
Yeah.
And Pam Popper was saying, start Thursday night meetings, because what we all need to become is one-issue voters. So the issue is this: do you or do you not believe that we should have the right to determine what gets injected into us or into our children? Like, that's just one-issue voters. So let's just make this the one issue.
Right.
Okay. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll start Thursday night meetings. And what I've done during that past 3-4 months, I was doing a daily kind of ministry on Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah,
every day, I would talk about things like, has your child come back from college and you're suddenly a racist?
Yeah.
Is that happening to you? Or, I mean, I had a friend living in Minneapolis, 8 blocks from where they were burning down the city in a peaceful protest. So I was just talking about that stuff.
Right.
Until my channels got removed.
Yeah.
And so I knew that something needed to be done. And so I thought, okay, so then I had those people in my phone who had come up to me and said, we've been listening to you, thank you, it's keeping us sane. So I had the first meeting, 20 people over to my house. And the plan was this: to file the same lawsuit in as many states as possible. And the lawsuit was this: at what cycle threshold were you running the PCR test that shut down the state? Because we all need to understand that Corey Mullis, who won the Nobel Prize for making that test, basically said it can't diagnose anything.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, and then he, looking as healthy as me, managed to die in December of 2019.
Oh no, I missed that part.
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Well, what I will tell you is every state, even if you believed that it was showing you anything, every state was running it at a threshold of 40, when anything over 24 was a false positive. So what they did, they shut down the state with a bogus test. So we were going to have that same lawsuit everywhere.
Right.
Well, and then Ron Jenkins walks into my house, this lawyer, and I said, since all the lawyers were going along with, well, this is what the CDC said, and everyone lost their critical thinking ability.
Exactly.
And I said to Ron, because he said he would take the case, and I said, why are you awake? He said, I represent victims of medical terrorism in Guatemala who have been given syphilis by the Rockefeller Foundation and the U.S. Public Health Service. So Tuskegee 101.
Yeah.
Or 2.0.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's the thing, is I think a lot of the nefarious activity, it doesn't get the media coverage, right? So we just kind of trust.
Because the media, the corporate media, is bought by other forces.
Which is why we're recreating the media, by the way.
Yes, we are. That's right. But on Good Friday of 2020, I watched this movie called Out of Shadows.
Okay.
And you can go Into the Light movie.
Okay.
So you can see that for free.
Okay.
Out of Shadows. And this was Mike Smith's movie, and he had been a stuntman in Hollywood. And he fractured his pelvis in a freak accident. So he was in Batman, he was in all of them. And as he's getting rehabbed, the Pilates teacher says to him, "May I pray for you?" And he's like, "Oh, knock yourself out." You know, like us East Coast, right? Fine, go ahead, right? Yeah, there's nothing
It's not
to
going to do
that,
anything.
right? That's a fairy tale. And she said, "Well, you know, who do you think I'm seeing? I'm seeing all the people who've been victimized by the demonic energy in Hollywood." And then he talks about Hollywood, the wood of the holly, to cast spells. So there's spell casting, but when you do it to a whole group, it's called broadcasting.
Oh my gosh!
Okay.
Wow.
And then, and he talks about Mockingbird Media.
Yeah.
And that was all CIA. So they used the broadcasting to hypnotize everybody. And it didn't matter if you're in Topeka, Kansas, or Portland, Maine.
Right. You're gonna
This
get the
is a
same.
threat to our democracy over and over and over. And by the way,
vendetta.
we never want a democracy. That is mob rule. We need a constitutional republic. That is what the Constitution and the Bill of Rights was for, to form a constitutional republic, which is why we say, "And to the republic for which it stands,
Right.
one nation under God."
Right.
We don't want a democracy.
Well, see, I do actually. I'm curious about that. I have a Oh God. Okay, so you've seen the documentary I Am. In that, I remember a scene where they're showing flocks of birds, and they're showing that they've like slowed down that video footage and watched it in super duper slow mo to try to figure out what's happening. And what they've noticed is it's not just birds, but like animals that might migrate to seek water do the same thing. So you've got a whole group. They don't pick a direction until 51% exactly pick a direction.
Oh, I love that.
So they're like flying, and it's literally, they've slowed down the video
Yeah.
footage to see, and it's the moment that 51% of the beaks pick one direction, then they go.
Wow.
And with animals, when they're trying to pick which direction might water be,
Yeah.
like elk or whatever,
Yeah.
when like 51% of the antlers are in one direction, they just take off. And it makes me think of the 100th monkey topic. I'm like,
yeah.
if
That's
we
where
can
we
get,
are right now.
if we can get 51% thinking for themselves, game over.
That's right. And that's where we are. That's where we are right now. I do
Thanks
believe.
to you. I mean, thanks to people that have the courage to not only have the expertise, but risk having those same experts look at you funny because you think differently, because you think, you know, for yourself. That brain you've trained is still wiring, which is amazing. You know, some of us just sit in front of the television, Netflix all day. You tell me what to think.
Yeah, I know. I know. Well, it was one of those things. The way I describe it is we're all sitting around, right?
Yeah.
And then COVID hits, and suddenly the light goes on all over the place, and you begin to find your people.
Absolutely.
But Alex Collier, the Andromedan contactee, who's a friend of mine, has a wonderful way of talking about this. And he said, the story I like the most is 200 million of us came back in time to right a great wrong.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that, there are a bunch of different timelines. And there was the Black League, and there was Lyra, and that got blown up. And the old sitcom, not sitcom really, Lost in Space, Danger, Danger, Will Robinson. This was about that time when all these families had to leave Lyra, which was being taken over by a dark force.
Interesting.
And I just feel so strongly that those of us who could see it, recognized each other, and then we came together, because this time, the Earth has had 5 great extinctions. This time we're going to do it. This time we're not going to let ourselves be destroyed. And so I kind of always knew this.
Right.
But I couldn't keep my mouth shut during the COVID thing, because first of all,
Thank
I
God.
knew at the beginning was when you were going to save the lives.
Right.
Telling people at the beginning.
Right.
Okay, here's how you make hydroxychloroquine with, grapefruit peels and lemons, and this is what you need to do, and keep everyone out of the hospital, and no one needs this. And we were doing that around Maine in our community. So
Absolutely.
recently, We just found out one of our women, who's a nurse and an acupuncturist, has a dark field microscope. So now we're all going to be able to know when we've cleared up our blood. And, so it's, and we know who the farmers are. And it's all literally what I call God's internet. Like you meet the people.
I love that.
Yeah.
That is brilliant. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, because it's been so painful to see so many relationships get compromised.
It's awful. Let's be clear. This is a time of enormous grief.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe people who would say you can't come see the baby unless you have 7 shots, or you can't come for Christmas, or that level of, they're deceived.
Yeah.
They're so deceived.
It's really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
One element that you were discussing with the grocery stores, I have to communicate, because it might be like a random piece of the puzzle I can share. Because I mentioned I was in Bio 2. I was really in a cognitive sciences graduate certificate program. So I think it was spring of 2021. I was in research methods in cognitive science. It was all online. Everything had been for a couple years. We have a data analyst as a guest speaker. I let him talk. I enjoy his whole presentation. And at the very end, I said, have you noticed any differences in the data you've collected since COVID, since the lockdown? And he, yeah, absolutely. And he was like excited about it. And he says, this is the cleanest data we've ever collected. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like looking at the rest of the class, because I'm kind of like, does anyone else see what that could potentially mean? So let me iron that out. We think that when we separate by 6 feet, we are somehow protecting ourselves from germs. If you're looking at CCTV footage and you're analyzing grocery store traffic, you got clusters of people, you can't tell who's who, you can't tell what's what. But if you tell everybody to isolate for germs, now they're separated. Now you can isolate each individual. You can actually tell who is where all the time. And people don't realize the risk of that, because I think, if you're lucky, you can shop places that don't have it, like Royal River Natural Foods and, good mom and pop shops. But it's become increasingly common for the surveillance. And, that might be a good thing. But I will say, as someone who's worked somewhere at Home Depot, places that have that footage, nobody internal has access to it.
Interesting. That's very interesting.
So when you think like, you caught somebody, you just saw somebody steal something, there's an entirely separate team, and they don't even have any boots in the ground within Home Depot.
Wow. And that's, of course, what they did. They tried to close all the little businesses. When you think of the toll that this took on businesses, it's.
I just sell candles, and it's been tough.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
On the other hand, we are going to rise like Phoenix from the ashes.
Absolutely.
And the best is yet to come. So I'm excited about it.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
I don't know where the best place is to wrap up, but I really just want to thank you so much for taking any time to speak. I mean, you have so much hard-earned wisdom. It doesn't just come from the textbooks. You went the route. You went through medical school. You earned the degrees. But you did more than that. You took time really listening to your patients. I know, because I've met them. You've changed lives in a way that is unspeakable as far as I'm concerned. And I hope that there isn't a day that goes by where you don't hear that coming back to you in some form. Because I know there's probably been quiet months and confusing months, but please know it's all worth it. You've helped me. My mother claims that you saved her life because she read your book when she was going through menopause. I don't think she could afford formal medical care, but she was able to heal herself with your work. And that, I just can't thank you enough, really.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Oh, this is so lovely. Can I hug you?
Good. Yeah, we did it. We did it.
Was there anything you wanted to discuss that didn't come up?
We got it all. We got it all. Because we got Dartmouth and, we got...